Hi! In this video series, I'll teach you how to do basic video editing using the free version of Davinci Resolve 18. This video is broken into two parts, and this is part 1. Part 2 is linked in the description, or you can click on the card that's now showing in the upper right part of the screen. These videos assume you've never used Resolve before. Before we jump into this, I want to preface it by saying that Resolve can appear to be intimidating, but I'll do my best to simplify it and make it easy and clear for you to get up and running in it. Resolve is a very deep application, offers many different ways to achieve the same results. What I teach in these videos is not the only way to produce these results by any stretch. I'll show methods that I hope are easy for the user to grasp and use. As with any complex endeavor, practice will improve your skills. It also helps to be curious and play with things in the application to get a feel for what they do. The manual provided with Resolve is one of the best application manuals I've ever seen provided for an application, so don't be afraid to consult it. It's a very approachable document despite its size. My advice to you is get out and shoot lots of video and try editing it in Resolve. Use your phone or your GoPro or whatever camera you prefer. If you like, try and create stories. Make sure you have a clear beginning, middle, and end, and jump into Resolve and edit. By doing this, you'll gain proficiency and a better understanding of this amazing application. Before we jump into the install, I just want to point out that the model that Resolve uses for editing is very similar to other editing systems, such as Adobe Premiere Pro or Avid Media Composer, so if you're familiar with those, some of this may not be new to you. We'll start with the Windows download and installation of the free version of Resolve. If you're on a Mac, you can skip this part, and there's a link in the description's chapter index to take you to the Mac version of the installation tutorial. To get the free version of Resolve, we need to go to the Blackmagic Design website and download it. The link to the site is in the description. Once we're there, select Support from the menu at the top. On the Support page is a main header followed by the product selection area, and below this and on the left side is the latest downloads section. You may need to scroll down in this list to get to Resolve, as Blackmagic releases new software frequently and for a variety of products. Once you find Davinci Resolve, there'll be two versions, the free one and the studio one. If you see the word update in the title, don't worry, it's the full application and not just an update to an existing copy that you might have already downloaded and installed. For this tutorial, we are using the free version, not the studio version. As an aside, the free version has no time limit or watermarks or any other shenanigans to get you to buy the paid version. It just lacks the advanced features of the paid version. There's a paragraph describing what's new in Resolve with a More link at the bottom. I highly recommend you click on the More link and scroll down and check the system requirements to make sure that Resolve will run on your system. Below that are 3 links for you to choose either a Mac, Windows, or Linux version of the application. When you click on the Windows link, you'll be presented with a user registration form, and you must fill this out before the download will proceed. If you have privacy concerns, you can just use garbage data for each field. The email field will expect an @ in it to proceed. And while the state field does not have an asterisk indicating that it is required, it will be required if you choose the United States as the country. The last 2 fields are optional, so you can leave those blank if you like. Once completed, you'll be able to initiate the download of the zipped installer application from the site by clicking the Register and Download link at the lower right, like this. Depending on how your browser is configured, you may or may not be prompted for a save location. The Downloads folder is a default location in the Edge browser on Windows. Once downloaded, you'll have a zip file that contains an exe file that is the installer application you'll need to run. Extract the installer exe from the zip file. Initiate the installation by launching the exe file that you extracted from the zip file. You can accept the defaults in the installer application, and that'll be fine. As with most application installs, you'll be offered the opportunity to specify an installation location. It should be noted that you can only have one version of Resolve installed on your system at a time due to its use of shared components. Once the installation is complete, you should have a shortcut on your desktop. You can right-click it and pin it to the taskbar if you like, and then delete the shortcut from the desktop, which is what I'll do here. Go ahead and launch the application. The first time you launch it, you may be presented with a screen that details new features in the application. This screen only appears once, the first time you run Resolve. Dismiss the screen once you're done looking at it. Once you've dismissed the new feature screen, you'll be presented with the project management screen. Now we'll do the Mac install. Windows users can skip this section. There's a link for the next section of the tutorial in the video description's chapter list. To get the free version of Resolve, we need to go to the Blackmagic Design website and download it. The link to the site is in the description of this video. Once we're there, select Support from the menu at the top. On the support page is a main header, followed by the product selection area, and below this and on the left side is the latest download section. You may need to scroll down on this list to get to Resolve, as Blackmagic releases new software frequently and for a variety of products. Once you find Davinci Resolve, there'll be two versions, the free one and the studio one. If you see the word update in the title, don't worry. It's the full application and not just an update to an existing copy that you might have already installed. For this tutorial, we're using the free version, not the studio version. As an aside, the free version has no time limit or watermarks or any other shenanigans to get you to buy the paid version. It just lacks the advanced features of the paid version. There's a paragraph describing what's new in Resolve with a More link at the bottom. I highly recommend you click on the More link and scroll down and check the system requirements to make sure that Resolve will run on your system. Below that are three links for you to choose either a Mac, Windows, or Linux version of the application. When you click on the macOS link, you'll be presented with a user registration form that you must fill out before the download will proceed. If you have privacy concerns, you can just use garbage data for each field. The email field will expect an @ in it to proceed, while the state field does not have an asterisk indicating that it's required. It will be required if you choose United States as the country. The last two fields are optional, so you can leave those blank if you like. Once completed, you'll be able to initiate the download of the zip file that contains the DNG file that has the installer application inside of it from the site by clicking the Register and Download link at the lower right like this. Depending on how your browser is configured, you may or may not be prompted for a save location. The Downloads folder is the default location in the Safari browser on the Mac. Once downloaded, you'll have a DNG file that contains an installer application that you'll need to run. Initiate the installation by launching the installer app file. You can accept the defaults in the installer application, and that'll be fine. As with most installations for applications, you'll be offered the opportunity to specify an install location. It should be noted you can only have one version of Resolve installed on your system at a time due to its use of shared components. Once the installation is complete, you can navigate to your Applications folder in the Finder, and you'll find a folder called Davinci Resolve. Inside of that folder will be the Davinci Resolve application. You can drag it down to your dock if you like to make accessing it a bit easier. Go ahead and launch the application. The first time you launch it, you may be presented with a screen that details new features in the application if you're updating from an older version. This screen only appears once the first time you run Resolve. Dismiss that screen once you're done looking at it. Once you've dismissed the new feature screen, you'll be presented with the project management screen like this. Before we get into the tutorial, I need to clarify something. Due to inconsistencies of PC keyboard manufacturers and even Apple, I want to make sure that you understand when I say to press the delete key to delete something, it is this key on your keyboard. It is the same key on both the Mac and on a Windows keyboard. Most Windows keyboards will label this as a backspace key. For this tutorial, I will always refer to it as the delete key. So if I say to delete something, you'll select the item that should be deleted and press that key. The same if I say to use Shift-Delete. It's always that key. Okay, let's learn some Resolve. Resolve doesn't save projects in individual files as many other video editors do. Instead, it maintains a central database on your system where all projects are stored. One of the advantages of this is speed, as Resolve can update and read the database much faster than using discrete files. The first thing displayed when you launch Resolve is the Project Manager window. From here, we can create new projects, open existing projects, or delete existing projects. Within the Project Manager window, we have this untitled project already set up for us. Above this project window, it says Local, Network, and Cloud. We'll only be using Local as the others are generally reserved for collaborative workflows. Next to the word Projects at the top here is a button that we can click to expand the interface and reveal the databases that Resolve currently has defined. You can create more databases as you see fit, or just use the default one that Resolve creates for you on initial installation. I create different databases to organize my projects, such as YouTube projects or business projects, etc. The Add Project Library button at the bottom of this pane will let you create a new database. On our toolbar at the upper right here, we have the Create Folder button that allows us to create folders so we can organize our projects within the database itself. Clicking on it will prompt you for a name for the folder like this. Now I have a new folder and I can create new projects within the folder or move existing projects from the top level of the Project Manager to the folder or between different folders as well. Right mouse clicking will give us a menu that allows us to create new projects and folders as well. You can nest folders as deep as you like. At the upper left, we can see we now have Project and New Folder. This allows us to navigate up and down through our folders, so if I double click on Projects, it will take us back to the top level like this. With this new folder selected here, I'll press the delete key and Resolve will ask if I really want to delete it, and I confirm, and we're now rid of it as we don't need a folder at the moment. Next to that folder button is the Copy Project button. We can use this to copy projects to folders instead of moving them, as well as copying between databases. This icon with the lines and the down arrow allows us to specify a sort order for the projects that are displayed. We have a number of different elements to choose from, and Date Modified is the default, so that the most recent projects that have been changed will be sorted first. This little eye icon will show information about the currently selected project settings, such as resolution, etc. Next to that is the thumbnail selector. We can display projects as either a thumbnail display like you see now, or we can click on the lines icon next to it and get a list display. The advantage of the list is that while we don't get a nice thumbnail of what's in the project, we can see a lot more projects at once, along with more information about each project. Notice that the Info Eye icon is gone, since this display shows us that data by default. Switching back to the thumbnail view restores the eye icon icon for info. We also have this slider here that appears when we're in the thumbnail view that will allow us to control the size of the thumbnails in the project manager. If this untitled project was an actual project with video in it, we'd see a frame of video instead of this graphic in the center like this example. Finally, at the upper right, we have a magnifying glass that'll open up a search tool so we can search the database for a given project. This drop-down lets us search on notes, format, or project name. Down at the bottom here, we can export or import a project. This allows us to create a file version of our project that we can share with someone else, and they can import it into their copy of Resolve and change the project as they see fit. Or we can import a project that we may have previously exported as a file and subsequently removed from the project manager and the underlying database. Or we can use it to import a file that someone has given to us. This button will create a new project, which is slightly different from the untitled project up here. You'll always have this untitled project option in the project manager, as well as this create a new project button down here. The only time the untitled project option does not appear is if you're in Resolve and you open the project manager while you have a project open. At that point, untitled project will not be available. We'll see the difference between the two types of new project options in a few moments here. Now I could double-click the untitled project thumbnail to start a new project, or with it selected, I can click Open down here like this. Now we have a new empty untitled project. The first time you open your first project in Resolve, it will default to this cut page in the application. Resolve is broken up into multiple pages that you can access through these icons at the bottom of the screen. Each page has a different function within the program. To simplify things, I'm going to turn off every page except the edit page, where we will edit and create our amazing vacation video. We do this by going up to the workspace menu at the top here. Under the show page element, we can turn each of these other pages on or off inside of Resolve. Obviously, we can return to this menu at any time and restore any of the pages that we want to have displayed again by just repeating this process. The reason I'm doing this here is in an effort to ensure that we simplify the user interface in Resolve as much as possible so we don't overwhelm new users. Now we just have the one icon at the bottom, and this is for the edit page. You can edit on the cut page as well, but it provides a very different paradigm for video editing than the edit page, and again, in an effort to simplify, we will stick to just the edit page. I'll explain these main sections of the screen first so you at least have an idea of what we're looking at on this main editing screen. Within our edit page here, we have this pane on the left called the media pool. This is where we'll keep all of our media that we'll use in our editing session. This section down here is where we will assemble our clips into a sequence called a timeline. Above this, we have two video viewers. The viewer on the left side allows us to look at clips within the media pool and decide how we want to add them to our timeline. It's called the source viewer. The viewer on the right side will show us what's in the timeline so that we can play our edit back and see the final result, and it's called the timeline viewer. Before we get into this, I want to talk about preferences for the application. You'll find them in the Resolve menu at the upper left like this. When the Preferences window opens up, click on User at the top as it defaults to System, and we want the user settings for this change. On the left side is a list of user preference categories, and we want to look at the Project Save and Load. On that screen, under Save Settings, is Live Save at the top. We want to ensure that this is turned on. What this does is it forces Resolve to update every change we make to our project to the database as we make the changes. This way, no changes to the project can ever be lost. If the application crashes or you suffer a power outage, no work will be lost, and this can be a real lifesaver. Under the UI settings here at the top, we can tell Resolve to automatically load the last project we were working on and bypass the project manager window at startup setup if you like. I leave this turned off. I prefer to see the project window whenever I start Resolve. Below this, we have another setting that I consider a critical setting in Resolve: Show Focus Indicators in the User Interface. This will make Resolve give us a clear visual indicator as to what part of the screen is currently active and selected. Without it, we'd have no way of knowing that, and things can get very confusing very quickly without it. So we want to ensure that this setting is enabled. The indicator will appear as a red line along the top section of the element that's currently active and has the focus. Click the Save button at the bottom of the preference window to save the changes we just made. Now, when I click on this viewer here, you can see the red line indicating that it's the active element on the screen. Same when I click on the timeline viewer or the media pool or the timeline area, as you can see. The next thing we're going to do is to save our project. Even though we haven't done any editing yet, it's good practice to do this initial save of your untitled project. Once you do this and name the project, the active save feature will be able to start automatically saving our changes for us. Until we do this initial save of the project, the active save feature will not be activated and won't be saving our project for us. To do the save, I press Ctrl S in Windows or Command S on the Mac. Now I'm prompted for a name for my project like this. We'll call this Resolve Tutorial. We'll take a moment to create the new project in the database. Subsequent saves will happen lightning fast. Once completed, it will display the name of our project at the top of the screen like this. At the lower right of the screen is a house or home icon. If we click that, it'll open the Project Manager window that we had when we first launched Resolve. You can open that window at any time with this button down here. Now you can see that the untitled project is named Resolve Tutorial with a bit of information about the project underneath it, since we have the I or info icon enabled up here. Notice that there is no untitled project option in the Project Manager now, and that's because we have a named project open in the application, so it removes that option for us to simplify the display. If I were to use the New Project button at the bottom, it would force me to name the project before it creates it, and by doing so, the active save feature would be working the moment that I go into Resolve with this new project, since it has a name. So in the event that I just want to do some quick editing and not actually save the project that I create, I can use the untitled project, do my edit, output the result, quit Resolve, and throw away the temporary project. As you can see, there are a ton of tool icons in the user interface of the edit page here. I won't be going over every single element on this page all at once here, as that may prove a bit overwhelming for the new user. I'll explain elements as we need to use them in our edit, so you can see them in the context of an actual video editing session. So to recap real fast, we have our media pool over here that'll contain our clips and stills and audio files, etc. to be used in our edit session. We have our source viewer for looking at the media pool's clips and stills. We have our timeline view over here, and that lets us see our final product that we assemble into this area down here where the timeline will be. Before we start our actual editing session, I want to show you where your project settings are located, since they'll impact what we bring into our media pool, as you'll see in a few minutes. This gear icon at the lower right of the screen will open the project settings menu like this. Within this screen, there is a myriad of different settings, but this first page here shows us the project default resolution and frame rate. Resolution can actually be changed at any time, but frame rate, once it's set within our first timeline, will be locked into the project and we won't be able to change it after the fact, unlike resolution. For our tutorial here, I'll accept the defaults of Full HD and 24 frames per second. It should be noted you'll want to make sure that the frame rate of media that you intend to edit and resolve matches that which is in the project settings. You do not actually need to go into the project settings to update it, as we'll see in just a moment. Our first task in our editing session is to add media to the media pool. There are a few different ways to do this. We can use the import feature in the file menu and select media as to what we want to import, or we can use the keyboard shortcut of Control-I on Windows or Command-I on the Mac. Clicking on that import media will open a Windows File Explorer or a MacOS File Finder. All the examples will be in Windows, but I will always say what the Mac equivalent key is or feature is. I'll close this for now. Another way to import is to just right mouse click inside the media pool pane and select the import media option there. Works the same as the file menu option. Another method we can use is to just go out to my desktop, open up a Windows File Explorer window or a Finder window on a Mac like so, restore Resolve, and bring the file window up on top of Resolve and just drag and drop whatever media files that I want into the media pool. I'll undo that real quick. To clarify how Resolve handles the frame rate setting, I'm going to bring in a clip that's 30 FPS instead of the project's 24 FPS setting, so you can see what happens. By attempting to bring in this 30 FPS clip into my 24 FPS project, Resolve asks me if I want to change the project to match the frame rate of this clip. It will only do this once for a given project. Subsequent additions of clips at different frame rates will not give you the option to set the project frame rate, and that frame rate is now locked in and unchangeable. Something to keep in mind, since mixing different frame rates in the same project can result in jittery playback that you won't like. So make sure that you know the frame rate of your media. 30 frames a second is very common, as is 24, so that it'll match your project's frame rate setting. You can select change or don't change, and I'll select don't change as my media is all 24 frames and I'm not going to be using that 30 frame a second clip. I now have this 30 FPS clip in my media pool, and I'm going to click on it to select it and press the delete key to remove it, since it's not an appropriate frame rate for this project. Now that we have that out of the way, it's time to add some media and start our editing process. I'll bring up my File Explorer window and add the media from it to the media pool like so. I'll grab these two stragglers here and leave out that 30 FPS clip. Inside of the UI here, we can resize panes to better suit what we're working on. However, unlike other applications like, say, Premiere, you can't move any of them and rearrange the layout. You can only resize them. So on this screen, I can resize the viewer and timeline area. I can tell where an area is that I can resize when the mouse cursor changes to this double arrow. I can resize the media pool window like this as well, so that I can see more of the media within it. In the media pool, I can hover my mouse over a clip and it will show what is in the clip like this. Scrolling through a clip in the video world is referred to as scrubbing, by the way. I'm not clicking here, I'm just hovering over the clip. Notice on these thumbnails here that when my mouse is over a given clip, it shows this musical note on the lower left corner. This indicates that there's audio embedded within the clip. It could be any kind of audio, not just music. This clip next to the chess clip has no audio, so it lacks the musical note icon. In the lower right of each clip is this little ellipse inside a box. Clicking on it will give us details about the clip, such as start and end time codes, duration, resolution, and a number of other elements that pertain to the clip. In the thumbnail view like this, those little info elements can be very handy. This clip here, for example, is just audio, so it displays an audio waveform in the source viewer, and its icon in the pool is a waveform as well. It does not have the musical note icon since it's only audio. The musical note only occurs on video clips and only those that have audio embedded within them. This icon with the lines and down arrow above the pool will allow us to specify a sort order by any of these data fields, as well as to set the ascending or descending order of the sort here. It defaults to the clip name. Over here, we can set the pool to a thumbnail view, which is what we have now, or a list view. To the left of that is the metadata view that will show thumbnails along with some summary info about each clip. While in the thumbnail view we have this slider that lets us set the size of the thumbnails like this. In the list view or metadata view, that slider will disappear. List view lets us see much more about the clips in the pool since much less room is taken up by each clip, as you can see here. We get the name of the clip and a bunch of info about each clip. Scrolling to the right in list view, we can see there's a veritable cornucopia of information displayed for each clip. The metadata view is a kind of hybrid between the thumbnail and list views, but bear in mind that even though it shows a thumbnail, you cannot change the zoom level using the metadata view. You're saddled with the size that Resolve has chosen for you. I find I rarely use this view, but rather switch between list and thumb frequently as I edit. At the top, next to the view selectors, is a magnifying glass so we can search, and next to that is a drop-down that lets us set the scope of the search. Clicking on the magnifier, we open a search field where we can type our search criteria. The scope drop-down lets us limit the search to all bins or just the current bin. So, what is a bin? It's a folder. We can create one here by right-mouse clicking in the pool pane and select the New Bin option. Now at the upper left, I have a folder or bin that I can use to organize my media. You can nest these infinitely. Clicking on its name, I can give it a custom name, and I'll change it to music here. Now I can drag this music clip into the bin and drop it in there. Notice also that it resorted the list by name since our new bin is called music. Double-clicking on it reveals the music clip that I put into the bin. Now, on the left is the bin navigator panel for the media pool, and the top level bin is called master, and you can see my music bin falls under that master as it's a child, if you will. To return to the top level, I just click on master and I'm back to where all of my clips are stored. I'll undo those changes for right now using Control-Z on Windows and Command-Z on the Mac. Back at our search option up here, there's another drop-down that allows us to specify what piece of data about a clip we want to search on. File name, real name, clip name, etc. As you can see, the list is pretty extensive and offers a lot of flexibility. In the interest of saving some time, I've created 3 bins here: clips no audio, clips with audio, and music, and I've moved all of the media into these bins in an effort to better organize the project. To navigate them, I just click on their names in the bin navigator on the left, or you can double-click on the folder icon in the media pool. While we have an area to display a timeline in the UI down here, we still need to create a timeline to be used there. Right mouse clicking in the pool area here, we have a number of different options here, but the one that we care about is at the top. When we expand the timeline section, we can create a new timeline. We have a number of options here, such as name, number of video and audio tracks, etc. We can change any of these settings after the timeline is created, by the way. Nothing is written in stone here. This checkbox makes the timeline use the project settings. If I turn that off, I can change a number of timeline settings, such as resolution, etc. We will create a timeline and give it the name Resolve Tutorial, like so. Now you'll notice down below in the timeline display area, things have changed. I'll close the media pool to give us some more room by clicking on the media pool button at the top left of the UI here. Now you can see that there are all kinds of tools along here, and we'll look at some of these as we create our edit. I have 1 video and 1 audio track, as you see here. Let me expand the audio track down a bit so we can see the name of it. We can change the name of the track, so I can click on the video 1 name and change it to just be video, and the audio track, we can rename it to be music. I'll open the media pool back up now by clicking the media pool button at the top here once again. I'm going to undo with Control-Z on Windows and Command-Z on the Mac and get rid of this new timeline for now. As you can see, the timeline display area is back to the way it was before we had a timeline created. Another way to create a timeline is to just drag a clip from the pool into the timeline area and drop it. I'll use this chest clip that has audio with it and drop it in here. Drag the clip over to the start of the timeline and it creates a default timeline for us. Again, I need to make the audio track slightly taller. You can also do this by hovering over a video or audio track and holding the shift key and using your mouse wheel to do a vertical zoom on the tracks. Now that the audio track is bigger, we can see an audio waveform area, and it just has one bit of audio in the clip right here. I'll undo all of that once again with Control-Z, Command-Z on the Mac. Now I will click on the chest clip and you can see it has an orange border around it that indicates that it's selected and is the currently active element in the pool. Now as I hover over it, it's playing the clip in both the thumbnail view and in the source viewer over on the right here. We're going to create a timeline using the clip here. When I do this, it will put the timeline file inside of the bin with the clip. Notice that when I take the mouse away from the clip, the viewer turns blank. I need to double click the clip and that will load it into the viewer so that we can work on it using the viewer. Now within the viewer, I have this playhead that I can use to scrub through the clip as I see fit. This arrow indicator here says that you're at the first frame, and this one indicates the last. You can use these buttons here to jump to the first and last frames of the clip. This button will play the clip in reverse like so. This one plays it forward, and the square will stop it. There are keyboard shortcuts for this. J will play the clip in reverse. I use K to stop it. The keyboard shortcuts offer an advantage that you can speed up the playback of the clip with multiple presses of the key. J for backwards and L for forwards, and K stops playback. The spacebar will also start and stop normal speed playback. For each subsequent press of J for reverse or L for forwards, playback speed is doubled. You can see it indicated here on the source viewer monitor. Next is the loop control, and this will make it repeat playback once it reaches the end of the clip or the start of the clip if you're playing in reverse. You can stop it by using the stop button or K or the spacebar. Clicking on the loop control while it's playing back will not stop the looping until you cancel playback, and then it will resume normal function. You can also use the home and end keys to go to the start and end of the clip. This button is the match frame. It's used for a more advanced editing feature that I'm not covering here. These last two arrows on the right side are called mark in and mark out. It's common to use only a portion of a clip in an edit. Using these, we can set a start and end point for our clip within the source viewer. The keyboard shortcuts of I for in and O for out are also available. So for example, at the start of this chest clip, I might want to cut off the part where nothing is happening and start the clip where the hand moves into the shot like this. I click the mark in button, and now you can see a highlight has appeared on the scrubbing bar that indicates the range from in to out. The clip always defaults to include everything, so our current out point is the end of the clip, and the highlight extends down to the end as a result. Moving the playhead down, you can see that there is a little dot on the end of the highlight that indicates the end point for the clip. Let's say we want to end the clip before its physical ending, let's say right about here. I can click Mark Out, and as you can see, the highlight is shortened to reflect that change. Moving the playback head, we can see that our little highlight now has a dot to indicate the out point. You can actually move the in and out by clicking on the little dots and dragging to the spot that you want. It can be challenging to be accurate by doing that, however. As previously noted, I and O will set in and out as well, just like this. Notice that in the thumbnail there are two vertical lines in the clip now, and these are showing us where the in and out points are defined for that clip. If you do not see any lines like that in the thumbnail, then no in or out has been defined for it. I'll zoom in a bit here so you can see it a bit better. To clear the in and out points from a clip, go to the clip in the media pool, click on it so that it's selected with the orange border, and then press Alt-X on Windows or Option-X on the Mac, and that will clear the in and out points for you. We can create in and out points on a clip and then use that to create a timeline. We don't have to set in and out to do this, but I will for this demonstration. I have set an in and out point. Notice that when I hover the mouse over the clip in the viewer, you can see an overlay with the little film icon on the left and the little audio waveform icon on the right. If I was to click and drag just one or the other of these two elements, then I would only get either video with no audio or the audio with no video, depending on the one I chose. To get both elements, I click and drag from the center of the viewer instead of on these overlay icons. So if I drag from the center of the viewer into the timeline area and drop it, it creates a new timeline, and we can see I got both the audio in the green track and the video in the upper track, and that created a new timeline file based on the clip, and you can see it in the pool over here. Just to make sure it's clear to you what's happening here, I'll use this other clip with audio here to demo this effect. If I just drag the overlay icon with the audio waveform, I'll get a new timeline and just the audio portion of the clip like this. Dragging the video icon, it will bring in just the video like this. Dragging from the center gives us both. I'll zoom the pool out a bit, and you can see that the timeline thumbnail has this icon on it, and that icon indicates that this is indeed a timeline element. Since we can have multiple timelines in a project, the checkmark indicates which timeline is the one currently in use. I can create a new timeline by right-mouse clicking on this clip here and selecting the Create New Timeline Using Selected Clips option, and we get the timeline creation dialog like we did before. I'll name it Hibiscus since that's what the clip is of, and let it create the timeline. Now you can see that a new timeline was created in the pool called Hibiscus, and it has a check mark now since it's the active timeline. If I double click on the previously created timeline, you can see that it gets a check mark and becomes the active timeline. I'm going to undo all of that since we won't be using those. Before we create our actual timeline for the tutorial, I wanted to point out that you can go into any bin in the bin navigator over here and drag and drop any clips into one of the other name bins in the navigator. You can see it's highlighting the names of the bins as I hover over them to indicate a destination for the clip, and when I release the mouse, it moves it to that bin. If you want to create a copy, just use Control-C on Windows and Command-C on the Mac to copy whatever the clip or set of clips that you want to copy. Open the destination bin and press Control-V on Windows or Command-V on the Mac and paste them in, and it will create copies instead of moving. If you paste into the same bin that you copied from, it will create a duplicate of the clip or clips and give it the same name as the originals, so be careful with that as it can get confusing. I'll undo my clip move. Remember that the top level called master is just a bin like any that you create and will behave the same as any bins that you create. When we start our video editing project, we create a timeline, and to do that I will choose an opening graphic animation here, and I'll just drag it into my timeline region on the UI like so. I click and drag it to the left so that it butts up against the start of the timeline and subsequently the start of the video. I didn't use the source monitor and set it in and out. Let's undo this and use the source monitor. I double-click the clip to bring it into the source monitor. We'll start at the beginning of the clip and then set this spot here for the out point. I can always change these once I'm in the timeline. The in and out here are not written in stone. Now, instead of dragging and dropping the clip into the timeline area, I have another option here, and that is to drag it over the timeline viewer. I'll turn off the media pool and resize the viewer area so it's a bit easier to see like so. Now I can drag the source clip to the timeline viewer, and we can see it offers a number of different options for us to choose from. Insert, overwrite, replace, fit to fill, place on top, append at end, and finally ripple overwrite. I'll use append at end here like this, and now it's added my clip and created a timeline for me like so. As we can see, we have a new timeline defined inside of my current bin at the bottom here called Timeline 1. You can also see the name of the current timeline above the timeline viewer, and since we can have as many timelines as we want in a project, I can use this drop down and select a new active timeline if I had defined them. In an effort to keep things organized, I tend to keep my timelines in the master bin and not in a bin with footage. So I just drag and drop it to the master bin like so, and click on the master bin so I can see its contents. And now I can click on the name of the timeline and give it a meaningful name like Our Vacation. I'll resize the UI slightly here. As previously indicated, we have a number of tools here that we can use, and we'll explore some of them as we do our edit session. We'll look at these three here right now as they pertain to adding a clip from the source viewer into the timeline like we did when we dragged the source clip over the timeline viewer. The first one is Insert Clip, which will insert the clip before the clip in the timeline that the playhead is currently over. That's followed by Overwrite, and I'll demonstrate that in just a moment, along with the third one here, which is Replace Clip. Insert is pretty obvious to its function. I'll move the playhead to about the middle of my timeline clip here. Let me load up a new clip into the source viewer. We use this office clip here, and I'll set an in and an out point. Now I click on the Overwrite clip, and it overwrites whatever content was in the timeline starting at the playhead's current location and extending for the duration of the in and out of the source clip. I'll undo that, and we can look at the next tool here, Replace Clip. Clicking on Replace Clip, we can see that indeed it replaced the entire clip with the one from the source viewer. I'll undo that and turn off our media pool once again so we can see the main screen a bit better. As a slight aside here, I want to go over timeline navigation. I've covered a little bit of this, but I want to make sure you understand your options here. I'll use this other project I created in Resolve for this. The timeline can be navigated in much the same way that the source viewer above is navigated. In fact, the timeline viewer on the right controls the timeline playback using the same set of controls that we have repeated here, just like the source viewer uses. So the spacebar will start and stop it. The buttons for playback and start and end all work the same as the source viewer button, but affect the timeline playback instead. This also includes J for backwards at multiple speeds, K to stop, and L to play forward at multiple speeds. There are a few more keys that I wanted to go over real quick that can be very helpful. If I have a timeline with multiple clips in it like this, I can use the up and down arrow keys to jump between different edit points in the video. The up arrow will jump to the previous edit in the timeline, and the down arrow moves to the next edit in the timeline. I can also use left and right arrows to move one frame at a time. If you look at the upper left of the timeline, you can see the current time code for our video based on the playhead's position. It's expressed in hours, minutes, seconds, and frames, and it'll always start at hour 1, even on a blank timeline with no content or duration. If I use the left and right arrow keys, you can see the frame indicator incrementing and decrementing by 1. If I use the shift key with the arrow keys, you can see that it now changes by 1 minute per key press instead of 1 frame. One final item I'll point out here is how to zoom the timeline in and out. On Windows with the timeline selected, you can see the red bar up here. Press Ctrl+ to zoom in and Ctrl- to zoom out. On the Mac, this is Command+ and Command- respectively. If you're zoomed in and want to be able to see the timeline in its entirety, press Shift-Z. Pressing Shift-Z again will restore your previous zoom level. Okay, now that we have an idea of how to navigate the timeline, let's get back to our main editing project. Next up, I want to talk about the track tools that are on the left side of our timeline. Besides the fact that you can have many tracks of video and audio, you can name each track, so I'll rename the video track from Video 1 to just Video. On the audio track, I'll rename it to be Clip Audio. Looking at the timeline viewer, we can see our opening graphic clip here. If I lock the track by clicking on this lock icon, I can still see the clip and playback works normally. However, I can't make any changes to the clips on that track. I can't move them, trim them, or delete them. Now, clicking the lock icon again, unlocked, I can delete it or whatever I want to do with it. I'll undo that with Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac. This button will disable the track. Let's say I have this clip of this woman placed over the V1 track like so. Because the clip of the woman is now on a new video track, V2, it takes precedence over what we see on the timeline viewer. The topmost video track is always going to be what we see, obscuring all tracks below it unless there are transparency options set for that clip. Now, let's say I need to see the video on the track below the topmost track. I can click the Disable Track button, and now I can see the track below it. I can still edit and manipulate the contents of track V2. I just can't see it. I'll undo that to get rid of it real fast. Below the video track, we have our default audio track that we just renamed. It has a few different controls on it, so to demonstrate those, I'll bring in a video clip that has audio included with it. And to do that, I'll get rid of our intro graphic for the moment. I'll open the media pool and grab this clip here that has some audio in it. Now you can see the green section represents the audio portion of this clip. It only has a tiny bit of audio, as you can see right here. It's the sound of the player conceding the game by dumping over their king. You can add more tracks by right mouse clicking on the left side of the timeline and selecting the option to add a new track. If you do it in the upper section, it will add a new video track, and the lower will add an audio track. For an audio track, we have options to create stereo, mono, or surround tracks. I'll say mono for this. Notice that on the right side of the track control header, it says 2.0 on the top track and 1.0 on the bottom. These indicate stereo and mono respectively. I'll enlarge the mono track slightly so we can see its name of Audio 2. I can add an audio-only element to the track just by dragging and dropping it into the audio track like this. I'll close the media pool once again and adjust our UI so we get a better view of things. Notice that there's a red outline around A1, but not around V1 or 2 here. And the reason for that is the last thing we selected in the media pool was purely audio. If I select a video clip, you can see that the red box moves up to the video track. This red outline indicates what track is going to receive content when we use one of the tools to add content to the timeline. When I drag the clip of the woman from the source to the timeline viewer and select Append at End, it goes on to the video 1 track. As you can see, it added it to the track that has the red outline around the track number. I'll undo that and click on the V2 track number, and that will move our red outline up to that track. Now when I drag our clip from the source viewer over to the timeline viewer and select Append at End, it places it on the track that had the red outline around the track number. The track number has a third state, and that is this gray state, and what that does is prevents any new content from going to that track using the normal clip edit tools like Append at End. With no red outline anywhere, new content won't be added to any of the tracks. The red outline works exactly the same on the audio tracks as it does on the video. Right mouse clicking on the track control area will also let you delete the track that you're over or move the track up and down so you can reorder them as you see fit. For now, we'll delete the upper track since we don't currently need it. Back down on the audio track, we have a couple of controls. We have lock, that works the same as the lock on the video track, auto track selector, solo, and mute buttons. We'll look at solo and mute first. Mute does what you would expect. It mutes the audio on that particular track. S will solo the track by muting all other tracks in the timeline and only allowing you to hear the soloed track. Let's rename this second audio track to be music, since that's what it has in it. Our last element to explore is the auto track selector. Let's say I have this clip that I want to cut in the timeline, and I have the music underneath, as you can see here. I can use the cut command, which is Control-B on Windows and Command-B on the Mac, to cut the clip at the location of the playhead in the timeline. Let's say I want to cut a chunk of it out, and I move the playhead and use the cut command again. You can see the cut line, and now there's another one under the playhead. Let's say I want to delete that portion of the timeline between my cuts. I press Shift-Delete on Windows or Shift-Delete on the Mac. It's the same keys. As you can see, the cut extended into the music, and it cut and trimmed the music track as well. And that's not what I wanted, so this is where the Auto Track Selector comes into play. I'll undo the delete and the cuts. Now, by turning the Auto Track Selector off, it changes the default behavior of the cutting action. By recutting the clip with the Auto Track Selector turned off, you can see that the cuts do not extend into that audio track. Now I can delete that chunk and the music track remains intact. I typically turn off Auto Track Selector on any music track in my project. The Auto Track Selector works the same on the video tracks as it does on the audio tracks that we just used. That covers all of the track header controls. I'll clean things up here real fast. I press Control-A or Command-A on the Mac to select everything in the timeline while the timeline is selected, and press the Delete key so we can start fresh. This concludes part 1 of this tutorial. You can click on the link to part 2 in the description of this video, or click on the card displayed at the upper right of the screen now to continue part 2 as well. If you like the video, please click like, as that helps other folks find it. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching this, and I hope you got something out of it. I will see you all in part 2 of this Resolve editing tutorial, and until then, take care.